3 months after the knockout that shook the world, Chuck Norris stood alone in his private dojo at 4:47 a.m., the time his body had been programmed to wake for over 4 decades. The Texas dawn hadn't yet broken through the windows, leaving the training space bathed in the blue-gray light that exists between night and day, between sleep and waking, between who you were and who you're becoming. His reflection stared back at him from the mirror that covered the eastern wall. 65 years old. Every line on his face told a story. Tournaments won, movies made, students taught, challenges overcome. But lately he'd been seeing something else in that reflection, something he hadn't expected. Doubt, not about his abilities, not about his technique, but about what his victory over Rodriguez had unleashed. The heavy bag in the corner still bore the indentations from last night's training session. 2 hours of strikes, each one precise, each one calculated. His knuckles were slightly swollen, a reminder that age doesn't eliminate pain. It just teaches you to work through it differently. His phone sat on the bench, screen dark, but he knew what waited inside. 47 messages, 63 emails, all variations of the same theme. Challenges. Fighters who'd seen the Rodriguez knockout and decided they wanted their shot at the legend. Some respectful, some not. All of them missing the point entirely. He hadn't fought Rodriguez to prove he could still compete. He'd fought him to teach him a lesson that words couldn't convey. The fact that Tommy had learned it, had truly absorbed it, and changed because of it, made the whole spectacle worthwhile. But now the floodgates were open. Chuck moved to the center of the mat and began his morning forms, the same patterns he'd practiced for 40 years. His body knew them so well that his mind could wander while his muscles remembered. And this morning his mind wandered to a conversation he'd had with his wife the night before. "They're never going to leave you alone now," she'd said, her voice carrying both pride and concern. "Every fighter with something to prove is going to come calling." "I know," he'd replied. "You can't fight them all, Carlos." She was the only person who still called him by his birth name. "You proved your point. You don't owe anyone anything else." "I know," he'd said again, but they both knew he was lying, because the truth was more complicated. Every challenge that came in wasn't just about ego or publicity. Behind each call-out was a young fighter who'd missed the lesson entirely, who thought martial arts was about dominance rather than discipline, about proving superiority rather than achieving mastery. And if Chuck ignored them all, what did that teach? That legends hide? That wisdom retreats when challenged? That the old ways only work when convenient? The form ended. Chuck stood in the ready position, breathing controlled, heart rate barely elevated. 40 years of conditioning meant his body recovered from exertion faster than men half his age. That's when he heard it. A notification sound from his phone, different from the others. This one was the tone he'd set for messages from Master Chen, his oldest friend and senior student. Chuck walked to the bench and picked up the device. The message was simple. "Watch this. We need to talk." The attached video loaded slowly, the progress bar creeping across the screen like it knew the contents were going to change everything. When it finally played, Chuck found himself watching a press conference from Tokyo. The fighter on screen was young, maybe 28, with the build of someone who'd spent their entire life perfecting violence. Kenji Yamamoto. Chuck knew the name. Everyone in martial arts circles knew the name. Undefeated kickboxing champion. 38 wins, 0 losses. Known for his brutal leg kicks and his even more brutal finishing instinct. But it wasn't Yamamoto's record that made Chuck's jaw tighten. It was what he was saying. "Chuck Norris got lucky against a boxer," Yamamoto sneered, his English heavily accented but deliberately clear. "Boxing is limited. Kickboxing is complete fighting. I challenge him to real combat. No movie tricks, no lucky punches. When I'm done, everyone will know the truth. Chuck Norris is finished." The reporters at the press conference erupted with questions, but Yamamoto wasn't done. "I've studied the footage. Rodriguez was sloppy, emotional, undisciplined. I am none of those things. I have ended careers. I have broken bones. I have made champions quit their sport." He leaned forward, staring directly into the camera. "Chuck Norris, if you have any honor, you will accept my challenge. If you refuse, Everyone will know you only fight carefully selected opponents. Show the world you're not afraid of real fighting. The video ended. Chuck stood motionless for a long moment, the phone heavy in his hand. This was different from Rodriguez. Tommy had been loud, arrogant, disrespectful, but ultimately harmless. His ego was his worst quality, and once it was checked, he became teachable. But Yamamoto, Chuck had seen his fights, had studied his technique. This wasn't a fighter who needed humility. This was a fighter who enjoyed hurting people. 3 opponents in the last 18 months had required surgery after facing him. One had never fought again. His phone rang. Master Chen. "You saw it," Chen said without preamble. "I saw it. Your thoughts?" Chuck moved to the window, watching the first rays of sunlight break over his property. "He's not like Rodriguez. He's legitimately dangerous." "More than that," Chen said, "he's cruel. I've watched all his fights. He doesn't just win, he punishes. Even after opponents are clearly beaten, he continues attacking until the referee physically pulls him away." "I know. Chuck, you don't have to do this. Nobody would blame you for walking away from this one. You proved your point with Rodriguez." "And what happens if I walk away?" Chuck asked quietly. "Yamamoto gets to claim I'm afraid. Every future call-out will reference this moment. The narrative becomes that Chuck Norris only fights safe opponents. Better that narrative than the alternative." "What alternative?" Chen's voice dropped. "The one where you get seriously injured trying to prove a point to someone who doesn't care about lessons or honor or growth. Yamamoto doesn't want to learn from you, Chuck. He wants to break you." Chuck watched a hawk circle above his property, riding thermal currents with barely a movement of its wings. Efficiency, conservation of energy, perfect technique, making difficult things look effortless. "That's exactly why I have to fight him," Chuck finally said. "What?" "Chen, how many young fighters are watching Yamamoto right now? Seeing his success? Learning that cruelty and aggression are the path to victory? If nobody stops him, if nobody shows that there's a better way, we lose an entire generation to that philosophy." "You want to fight him to protect other fighters?" Chen sounded incredulous. "I want to fight him to prove that mastery beats aggression, that discipline beats cruelty, that the old ways still work against the worst the new generation has to offer." Chuck paused. "And yes, to protect the fighters who aren't ready for someone like him, but think they are." Silence on the line. Chuck could almost hear Chen wrestling with the logic, knowing it made sense but hating that it did. "If you're going to do this," Chen finally said, "you're going to need help. Real help. Yamamoto isn't going to make the same mistakes Rodriguez made." "I know. I'll need someone who knows his fighting style. Someone who can replicate his techniques and training." "I might have an idea about that," Chen said, "but you're not going to like it." "Tell me." "Tommy Rodriguez." Chuck blinked. "Rodriguez?" "Think about it. He's been training with me for 3 months now. He's absorbed more martial arts fundamentals in that time than most students learn in years. But more importantly, he's athletic enough, flexible enough, and motivated enough to learn Yamamoto's style for the purpose of preparing you." "Why would he be motivated to help me?" "I knocked him out on international television." Chen laughed. "That's exactly why he'd be motivated. Chuck, you changed that kid's life. He talks about you constantly. The lesson you taught him, the respect you showed him afterward. He's become your biggest advocate. If you called and asked for his help, he'd be on a plane to Texas in an hour." Chuck considered this. Rodriguez had surprised him with his post-fight humility. Most fighters would have made excuses, blamed circumstances, demanded a rematch. But Tommy had done something rare. He'd admitted he was wrong, accepted the lesson, and genuinely changed because of it. "You really think he could replicate Yamamoto's style well enough to prepare me?" "I think he's hungry enough to try, and hunger combined with natural athleticism and proper guidance can accomplish remarkable things." "All right," Chuck decided, "reach out to him. If he's willing, I'll call Yamamoto's camp today and accept the challenge." "Chuck!" Chen's voice carried a weight of concern. "Promise me you're not underestimating this. Yamamoto is 20 years younger than you. He's at his physical peak. His leg kicks have broken shins. His knees have cracked ribs. This isn't going to be like Rodriguez." I know, Chuck said softly, but that's what makes it necessary. Easy fights teach easy lessons. This one needs to mean something. After hanging up, Chuck stood in his dojo for another moment, feeling the weight of the decision settle over him. He was committing to something dangerous, something that could go very wrong. At 65, his body didn't recover like it used to. One bad injury could be permanent. But as he looked around the dojo, at the walls covered with photos of students he'd taught, tournaments he'd won, moments that defined his legacy, Chuck understood something fundamental. Legacy isn't built by knowing when to fight. It's built by knowing when fighting is necessary, even when it's not safe, even when it's not convenient, even when every logical voice says to walk away. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. Chuck picked up his phone and composed a message to Yamamoto's promoter. 3 words, I accept, Tokyo Dome. Then he began his second training session of the morning, each strike carrying new purpose, each movement rehearsing for a battle that would test everything he'd learned in 40 years of martial arts. The sun was fully up now, flooding the dojo with light, and somewhere in Tokyo, Kenji Yamamoto was waking up to the news that his challenge had been accepted, completely unaware that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his fighting career. 6 months after the knockout heard around the world, Tommy the Tornado Rodriguez sat in his newly renovated gym in Las Vegas, watching the sunrise through floor-to-ceiling windows. The place looked different now, less chrome and mirrors, more wood and tradition. A heavy bag hung in the corner, worn and weathered, not for show but for work. The motivational posters were gone, replaced by calligraphy scrolls with martial arts wisdom in languages Rodriguez was still learning to read. His phone buzzed. Another interview request. ESPN wanted him for their Where Are They Now segment. He declined it, like he'd declined the last 100 requests. The old Tommy would have jumped at any publicity, would have spent hours crafting the perfect soundbite, would have made sure every camera in Vegas knew where to find him. The new Tommy understood that some lessons are meant to be lived, not sold. You're here early, came a familiar voice. Rodriguez turned to see Master Chen, a 72-year-old martial artist who moved like water and struck like lightning. After the fight, Chuck had made a single phone call, and 3 days later, Chen showed up at Rodriguez's door with a simple proposition. You've been shown the door. I can teach you how to walk through it. Couldn't sleep, Tommy admitted, rolling his shoulders. Even 6 months later, he could still feel the ghost of that knockout punch. Not the pain. Chuck had somehow hit him hard enough to shut off his consciousness without causing any real damage, but the humility. That moment of hitting the canvas and realizing everything he thought he knew was wrong. Keep thinking about what Chuck said that night. Which part? Chen asked, settling onto a meditation cushion with the ease of someone who'd been doing it for 50 years. All of it, but especially. Rodriguez paused, the words still stinging. You should have stayed quiet. I replayed the footage 1,000 times. He knew exactly how the fight would end before the bell even rang. He knew I was going to throw that right hook, knew exactly where to lean, knew where to counter. It was like he'd already watched the fight before it happened. Chen smiled knowingly, the expression of a teacher pleased to see understanding dawn. Confidence built on victories over others is fragile. It depends on external validation, on maintaining an image, on never being tested too hard. Confidence built on mastery of self is unbreakable. It doesn't need to announce itself because it simply is. You're learning the difference. The hard way. Is there any other way? Chen stood fluidly. Show me your forms. Rodriguez moved to the center of the mat and began the kata Chen had taught him last week. His body, trained for 20 years to throw punches and slip jabs, was learning an entirely new language. Kicks that required flexibility he'd never developed. Stances that demanded balance he'd never needed. Breathing patterns that felt unnatural until suddenly they weren't. Better, Chen observed after Rodriguez completed the sequence. Your hips are opening up, but you're still thinking like a boxer. You're waiting for openings. In traditional martial arts, you don't wait for openings. You create them through positioning and timing. Again. They worked for 90 minutes until Rodriguez's shirt was soaked and his legs trembled. But his mind was clear, clearer than it had ever been in his boxing career when he was winning. That's when the gym door burst open. Marcus, Rodriguez's longtime manager, stood in the doorway looking like he'd just witnessed a car accident. Tommy, you need to see this. Right now. I'm training, Marcus. Whatever it is can wait. No, it can't. Marcus pulled up a video on his tablet, his hands actually shaking. Trust me. The video loaded, and Rodriguez felt his stomach drop. It was a press conference in Tokyo, crystal clear in HD, time-stamped from 6 hours ago. And on the screen, Kenji Yamamoto, undefeated Japanese kickboxing champion, 38 wins, 0 losses, known for his brutal leg kicks and even more brutal finishing instinct, was speaking directly to a camera. Chuck Norris got lucky against a boxer, Yamamoto sneered, his English heavily accented but deliberately clear, every word chosen for maximum disrespect. Boxing is limited, one-dimensional. Kickboxing is complete fighting. I challenge him to real combat. No movie tricks, no lucky punches, no carefully selected opponents. When I'm done, everyone will know the truth. Chuck Norris is finished. He is old. He is slow. He is living on reputation from 40 years ago. Rodriguez felt his jaw tighten, his old instincts flaring. The disrespect, the arrogance, the absolute certainty in Yamamoto's voice. He recognized it because he'd worn it like armor once, had believed his own hype so completely that reality's correction felt like betrayal. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, Marcus muttered. This Yamamoto kid has no idea what he's walking into. Actually, Chen interjected quietly, this is more complicated than you think. Both men turned to the old master, who had settled back onto his cushion, his expression grave. Yamamoto isn't just talk. He's legitimately dangerous. Unlike Tommy's orthodox boxing style, which Chuck could read from experience, Yamamoto has trained in multiple disciplines since childhood. Kickboxing, Muay Thai, Taekwondo. His kicks can break bones. He's done it 3 times. His knees have ended careers. 2 fighters never competed again after facing him, and he's 20 years younger than Chuck, at his absolute physical peak. You think Chuck might actually be in trouble? Rodriguez asked, surprised at the protective instinct rising in his chest. 6 months ago, he'd wanted to be the one to expose Chuck Norris as a fraud. Now, the thought of someone succeeding where he'd failed made him angry for entirely different reasons. I think, Chen said carefully, choosing his words with precision, that this fight will be fundamentally different from yours. You fought with anger and ego. Those are exploitable weaknesses. Yamamoto fights with precision and cruelty. He doesn't just want to win, he wants to hurt people. He's been sanctioned twice for excessive force even after his opponents were clearly defeated. He enjoys inflicting pain. The video continued playing. A reporter asked, Mr. Yamamoto, Chuck Norris is 65 years old. Aren't you concerned about seriously injuring him? Yamamoto laughed, and there was something cold in the sound, something that made Rodriguez's skin crawl. If he's stupid enough to accept, he deserves whatever happens. I'm not responsible for protecting old men from their pride. He wants to pretend he's still relevant? I'll give him a reality check he'll feel for the rest of his life. Maybe he'll need a cane when I'm done. Maybe a wheelchair. That's his choice to make. Jesus, Marcus breathed. This guy's a psychopath. He's a product of a system that rewards aggression over discipline, Chen corrected, but you're not entirely wrong. Rodriguez felt something snap inside him, a decision crystallizing. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found a number he'd saved but never called. A number Chuck Norris had given him the night of their fight, written on the back of a business card, with a simple message, when you're ready to learn more. Tommy had been waiting to feel worthy of making the call. Apparently, 6 months was long enough. The phone rang 3 times, then, hello, Tommy. Chuck's voice was calm, unmistakable, carrying that same centered quality it had carried in the ring when Rodriguez was throwing his best combinations and hitting nothing but air. Chuck, I just saw the video. Yamamoto, tell me you're not actually considering... I already accepted, Chuck said simply, like he was discussing dinner plans. 2 weeks from now, Tokyo Dome, 55,000 seats, pay-per-view in 70 countries. Rodriguez's hand tightened on the phone. Chuck, this guy isn't like me. I was all mouth in orthodox boxing. Predictable, emotional. Yamamoto is dangerous. I know. There was a pause and Rodriguez could hear something in the background, the sound of impact on a heavy bag. Chuck was training while talking. That's exactly why I have to fight him. What do you mean? Tommy, when I fought you, it was about teaching a lesson in humility. You were heading down a path that would have destroyed you eventually. Better to learn it from me in a controlled environment than learn it the hard way from life. Chuck's breathing didn't change despite clearly working out. But Yamamoto? He's been putting fighters in the hospital for sport. 3 opponents in the last year needed surgery after facing him. One had his leg broken in 2 places, and still Yamamoto kept kicking it until the referee physically dragged him away. He enjoys inflicting pain. Someone needs to stop him before he permanently ends someone's career or worse. Rodriguez processed this, his mind reeling. You're not fighting to prove yourself. You're fighting to protect other fighters. Now you're understanding, Chuck said, and Rodriguez could hear the approval in his voice. That same tone a teacher uses when a student finally grasps a difficult concept. Then let me help. Silence on the line. Not hostile, just considering. Chuck, I'm serious. I know what it's like to face you unprepared. I know what works and what doesn't, mainly because nothing worked. Let me be part of your training camp. I'll learn Yamamoto's style, replicate his techniques. I'll be the best training partner you've ever had. Please. The sound of the heavy bag stopped. More silence. Longer this time, and Rodriguez could almost feel Chuck thinking through the implications. Master Chen is with you, Chuck finally asked. Chen leaned toward the phone. I am, old friend. You think he's ready for this? Really ready? He's been training with focus and humility for 6 months. His natural athleticism, combined with proper guidance, has created something remarkable. Yes, I think he's ready. More than that, I think he needs this. Tommy, Chuck's voice came back. Do you understand what I'm asking? This isn't going to be like our fight where I controlled everything. In training, you'll have to come at me with real intent. Yamamoto's leg kicks are devastating. You'll have to throw them full force, which means risking hurting me. His knees can break ribs. You'll have to throw those too. Can you do that? Rodriguez thought about the question. 6 months ago, he would have jumped at the chance to hurt Chucknorris. Now the idea made him uncomfortable. But that discomfort was exactly why he needed to do it. I can do it, he said, because I know you need the real thing to prepare, and because I trust you to handle whatever I throw. All right, Chuck decided. Both of you. My gym in Texas. Tomorrow morning, 5 a.m. sharp. We have 2 weeks to prepare for something I've never faced before. What's that? Rodriguez asked. An opponent who wants to break me, Chuck said quietly. And for the first time, Rodriguez heard something in his voice that might have been concern. Not fear, never fear. But the acknowledgement that this was serious. Not just beat me, break me, destroy what I represent. He's not fighting Chucknorris the person. He's fighting Chucknorris the symbol, and he wants to shatter it on international television. The line went dead. Rodriguez stood there, phone in hand, feeling the weight of what he'd just committed to. Marcus broke the silence. Are you insane? You're going to help train the guy who knocked you out? Yeah, Rodriguez said, already mentally preparing for the trip. Yeah, I am. Why? Rodriguez looked at his manager, then at Chen, then at his reflection in the gym window. 6 months ago, that reflection showed a cocky, undefeated champion who thought he had all the answers. Now it showed something different, something better. Because Chuck didn't just knock me out that night, Marcus. He woke me up. And if Yamamoto breaks him, it sends a message to every young fighter out there that cruelty and aggression beat discipline and mastery. I can't let that happen. Chen smiled. Now you're thinking like a martial artist. What's the difference between a martial artist and a fighter? Marcus asked. Rodriguez remembered something Chuck had told him after the fight, when he was sitting on a stool in the locker room, ice pack on his jaw, ego shattered into a million pieces. A fighter wants to win. A martial artist wants to understand. And when you understand deeply enough, winning takes care of itself. He grabbed his gym bag. Pack your things, Marcus. We're going to Texas, and then we're going to Tokyo to watch something incredible. What's that? Rodriguez smiled, and it was Chuck's smile. calm, knowing, certain. A legend reminding the world why legends become legendary in the first place? 24 hours later, as the sun rose over Chuck Norris's training facility in Texas, three men stood together on the mat, a legend preparing for his most dangerous fight, a master ready to guide them both, and a former champion who'd learned that the greatest victory isn't winning a fight, but becoming worthy of standing beside those who fight for something greater than themselves. Chuck bowed to Rodriguez. Rodriguez bowed back, deeper, with genuine respect. "Let's begin," Chuck said simply. And in that moment, Rodriguez understood why he traveled 1,000 miles. Not to help Chuck prepare for Yamamoto, not to repay a debt, but because some lessons can only be learned by standing next to greatness and matching its dedication, one training session at a time. Marcus watched from the sidelines, shaking his head in disbelief. His fighter, his meal ticket, his undefeated champion before Chuck Norris humbled him, was now volunteering to help prepare the man who'd knocked him out cold. 6 months ago, this would have seemed insane. Now, watching Tommy move through warm-up drills with a focus and intensity he'd never shown before the knockout, Marcus was beginning to understand. Some losses teach you more than a lifetime of victories ever could. Chen moved between them, adjusting stances, correcting angles, his 72 years of experience flowing through every instruction. "Tommy, your kicks need to be faster, sharper. Yamamoto doesn't telegraph. Neither can you. Chuck needs to face the real thing." Rodriguez nodded, sweat already forming on his brow despite the cool morning air. He threw a low kick toward Chuck's lead leg. Fast, technical, powerful. Chuck absorbed it, his shin like iron. "Again," Chuck said. "Harder." Rodriguez threw it again, this time with real intent. The sound of impact echoed through the gym. Chuck didn't flinch. "Good. Now throw three in combination, the way Yamamoto does. Low, mid, high." They worked for 3 hours straight. No breaks, no complaints, just two warriors preparing for a battle that would determine more than just a winner and loser. Rodriguez threw hundreds of kicks, each one aimed at conditioning Chuck's legs for the onslaught Yamamoto would bring. His own legs burned, muscles screaming, but he didn't stop. "That's it for today," Chuck finally said, and Rodriguez nearly collapsed with relief. But as he sat on the mat, breathing hard, watching Chuck move to the heavy bag for what looked like another hour of training, Rodriguez realized something profound. Chuck wasn't just preparing his body for this fight. He was preparing his spirit, his mind, his entire being. This wasn't about winning or losing. This was about standing for something when standing was the hardest thing to do. "You okay?" Marcus asked, handing Rodriguez a water bottle. "Yeah," Rodriguez said, taking a long drink. "Better than okay. For the first time in my life, I'm part of something that matters." Marcus sat down next to him. "You know, I've been managing fighters for 20 years. I've seen champions come and go, but I've never seen anyone transform the way you have. That knockout Chuck gave you? Best thing that ever happened to your career." Rodriguez laughed, the sound genuine and full. "Best thing that ever happened to my life, Marcus. Not just my career." Chen joined them, settling onto the mat with a grace that defied his age. "Tomorrow we start studying Yamamoto's film. Every fight, every tendency, every technique. Tommy, you'll need to absorb it all. Become him in the training sessions." "I'm ready," Rodriguez said, and he meant it. The heavy bag swayed slightly in the morning breeze, still moving from Chuck's continued work. The sound of impact, steady as a heartbeat, filled the Texas dawn. The work had begun. And somewhere across the Pacific Ocean, in a gym in Tokyo, Kenji Yamamoto was training too, confident in his youth, his cruelty, his power. He had no idea what was waiting for him,